Here's where my biases are going to be showing, guys. Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald Money Meerschaert, GM3. One of the coolest guys in the UFC, claiming wins for American Jiu-Jitsu for the longest time. And you think about this guy, what Gerald brings to the table, he's extremely experienced, he's very savvy, and he's typically underrated, right? If you just look at this guy, people expect nothing from him, and they always talk about how he's not so good. But when you look at this guy, you know, what I think his most underrated attribute is that he's got a heavy body kick, right? And he's not afraid to throw it. So I think that defensively, his striking leaves a lot to be desired, guys. He's a little bit slow, right? I say this as a huge fan of Gerald, somebody that loves his style. He's a little bit slow. He's a little bit stiff. He's a little bit plodding in the early going. Those are some things he can't really fix, right? He's a little bit on the older side. And also he's been fighting for a million years. So he is a little bit rigid. But what he can do is he can deliver those big, heavy kicks that are thudding like pieces of wood, right? And then you can also see that he's got decent enough boxing combinations. He's willing to commit to his shots. He's a Duke Rufus product. He's been in the gym forever. So he knows where his bread is buttered on the feet. Don't try and be Johnny Sophisticato. Don't try and do 16-piece combinations. Basics, sticking to it, using his southpaw attack. And then when you look at, you know, what he does on the mat, he's typically very patient. He's very, aggressive when he gets a good position, and he can make people pay as soon as he gets on top. He tends to put people in really bad positions. Shout out to Tristan, says if RDR gasses from cutting weight for the first time, GM3 round 3 is super live. You know, GM3 is a prolific round 3 submission artist, but how about this? You know, GM3 slows people down pretty quick. All right, let's go back and look at Gerald Meerschaert, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at him on Tapology. So we're going to switch over to the tab. 37-17 in professional mixed martial arts, 12-9 in the UFC, guys. The all-time submission leader in the middleweight division with 11 submissions, guys. He's 11-1 career to the submission. Do not sleep on this man. Do not forget about Gerald Meerschaert and how skilled and talented that he is. If you look back, win over Edmund Shabazian, fantastic. We're going to go ahead and close out his grappling results. Win over Edmund Shabazian, fantastic. Goes against Brian Barberena, and against Brian, Brian just was not at the middleweight level, right? Like he just shouldn't have been there. But Edmund, that was a good win because Edmund's a freak athlete, and he's the kind of guy that can go out there and kick Brad Tavares' head off. Then you look at the Joe Pyfer fight, and he got knocked out. He lost to him in a grappling match as well. Joe Pyfer, big, strong kid, and presented too many problems for him. Bruno Silva, if you guys go back and watch that, I know Bruno Silva says he was sick and he hasn't really had a good fight in a couple of years now, but guys, go back and watch that. It is a guillotine in name only. This guy knocked him out. Gerald Meerschaert knocked out Bruno Silva, the great Bruno Silva, who's never been knocked out, never finished with strikes. Go back and look. Alex Pereira could not put him down with strikes. And GM3 said, sit down, young man, and he hit him with the force of God. So Gerald Meerschaert deserves all the credit. Been claiming wins for American Jiu-Jitsu since I don't know when. Then you look at Krzysztof Jatko, and that was not a great loss for GM3. He's a little bit hit and miss as a fighter, right? But then the win over Dustin Stoltzfus. Agent, all right. Dustin Stoltzfus out there getting a huge knockout over MAB over the weekend. Shout out to my guy, Mark Schillenberg. I'm so sorry about that, brother. MAB screwed the pooch on you. No doubt about it. This guy loses in Canada every time for whatever reason. He cannot get it right for these folks up in Canada. I feel bad for our guy, MAB. I don't know if that shin is there anymore, brother. And Dixon is saying, I'm hearing a lot of folks run with the narrative that RDR is a gasser. Concerns me when the entire MMA betting community agrees on any narrative. It's like chalk and DFS bound to fail. I definitely hear where you're coming from there. I try not to listen to other people's analysis too much. Especially early on in the week, I try and do my own thing. The only show I've listened to so far this week is Santino DeFranco and Brandon Olivas. I could tell you Olivas, was all the way out on GM3. Meanwhile, Santino DeFranco kind of feels the same way I feel, which is that Gerald Meerschaert is like a proven, UFC black belt, very quality. And I think that de Ridder, here's the thing. I'll just level with you guys, and I don't know as much about de Ridder. I'm going to have to familiarize myself more with his game. I watched a in-depth video, just how good is Reinier de Ridder on YouTube. Want to shout out to that guy. Who is that? I think Kenyon Kimura. Let me go ahead and pull this up because I watched this before I got on the air today. So How good is Reinier de Ridder actually by Keon Kimura? I'm going to share this on the screen so you guys can see it. So if you see this right here, this guy, Keon Kimura, makes some good videos. And this one right here, fantastic. If you want to get just a primer on this guy's career, he seems to me to be a pretty talented grappler. But how many guys have we seen be talented grapplers somewhere outside the UFC and then come into the UFC and maybe that grappling doesn't translate, or maybe the physicality doesn't translate, or, you know, maybe they get big nerves because they're competing in the UFC for the first time. Now, when you talk about RDR coming into a UFC Apex show against Gerald Meerschaert, maybe some of those nerves aren't there, but I'll tell you what, like if I was a primary grappler, if that was my real skill set and I was coming into a UFC fight, I would not be thrilled to sign the line against a guy like Gerald Meerschaert, just to tell you the truth, because Gerald Meerschaert is difficult to submit, right? If you look back, Jack Hermanson, guys, got him with the guillotine choke. Let's go ahead and show this on the screen. And it's listed as a guillotine choke. I would call it the seated, let's see, seated Ketakatami. Is that right? Seated Ketakatami. Yeah, the seated Ketakatami. That's the one, guys. So if you look, we'll go ahead and share this tab. The seated Ketakatami. This choke was taught to Jack Hermanson at a John Danaher seminar. Okay, this is Nicky Ryan in this thumbnail right here from B Team. But this choke, if you could see, it's basically a guillotine, right? You imagine the guillotine is somebody's head and their neck, right? Imagine you get the arm as well. You just go one stage deeper. So you have the arm engaged as well. And that choke is fantastic. It's extremely tight. And it takes people by surprise. So GM3, his one submission loss was against Jack Hermanson, who's just a pretty, fantastic grappler in his own right, a primary grappler for mixed martial arts, a guy who's very physically strong, has a Greco-Roman background. That guy was able to catch him in this choke, sit to it, and finish it before GM3 was able to react. That is the only time he's been submitted in the UFC, and he's fought a laundry list of tough opponents over the years, right? Khamzat Chimaev knocked him out in the first round. So obviously that one doesn't, quite flow the same way. But if you look at what this guy brings to the table, I think that Gerald Meerschaert is just very difficult to outgrapple, period, point blank. Dustin Stoltzfus had some success, but ultimately he couldn't sustain his own success because he got tired faster than GM3. And that's what GM3 does a lot of. If it was people running with that narrative, Dixon, and it was, for some guy who doesn't push a pace, for a guy who doesn't have good cardio and these kind of things, I would definitely get where you're coming from. But I do think GM3 has been this sneaky talent his whole career where, hey, I believe it was like minus 200 against Dustin Stoltzfus. And did he look minus 200 at any point? No. But was it inevitable that Dustin Stoltzfus was going to fall apart before Gerald Meerschaert? It kind of seemed like it was. And we've seen GM3 do that to a few people, right? We think about, again, a guy who was able to finish Trevin Giles, going out there and submitting him with that guillotine choke in round 3. It was GM3. So had to sneeze, but we're back. And I think that GM3 just doesn't get all the love and respect he deserves. One fight I want to highlight from his resume, guys, Makhmud Muradov was 25-6. Okay. He was doing well in the UFC. He was having some success. If you go back and look, he had beaten Alessio Di Chirico via decision, knocked out Trevor Smith in the 3rd round, knocked out Andrew Sanchez in the 3rd round. So you're thinking to yourself, man, this guy might actually have good cardio, right? This guy might actually be able to push the right kind of pace. And unfortunately, what ended up happening is Makhmud Muradov got submitted by the 2nd round in that fight. And if you go back and watch it, again, I feel like people don't rewatch these GM3 fights. If you rewatch it, he was hurting him to the body. GM3 was roasting this man on the feet by round 2. He got him tired by hitting him with that thudding body kick over and over again. So Makhmud Muradov, a guy who's known for the striking, a guy who's known for, going out there and moving around and doing all this, Gerald Meerschaert was able to just wear him down, chop him down, and it didn't take 3 full rounds, right? It was just that 2nd round, where he was able to get that going, and he quickly tired him out. I can just tell you guys, I was at the casino in person, and I was the only one with a Gerald Meerschaert ticket. Everybody was crying in their coffee, saying, how did minus 500 Makhmud Muradov lose? And me and my buddy Pete were jumping up and down because we had GM3 ITD. So I think when you look back, GM3 definitely biased as shit. I bet this guy against Khamzat Chimaev, one of the worst bets I've ever placed in my life. But that's how much faith and confidence I always have in my guy GM3 to test somebody's cardio down the stretch. When you get killed by the first right cross in 35 seconds, that's not going to do it for us, right? But when you see GM3 in these longer extended fights, I think he does a great job. And here's the other thing. Narrative Nation. Let's go Narrative Nation for my guy Dixon. GM3 has the potential to completely embarrass RDR. Imagine you're Dana White and you say, I could get this guy who's a champion in other organizations to come in and get beat by my gatekeeper, my ultimate gatekeeper, Gerald Meerschaert. I'm just saying, Narrative Nation, if he wins, we promote him. We move him up the card. We get to book him. Now he's our guy. Then we give him the UFC stamp of approval. But if he loses, we say he was never that good anyways, because that's a fraudulent promotion and the only real fights are in the UFC. So that for me is why I'm also like, yeah, GM3 is the UFC's hitman right now. Nobody respects GM3 more than I do. So I feel like coming into this fight, I got love and respect for my guy GM3. It's going to be a battle, always is with a guy like GM3. He's going to have some difficult moments, but I feel like if this guy, comes out here and he tries to go for a finish, tries to go grapple with GM3, like go find out, because I think he could definitely take him out, right? Like he's a young man, he young enough, I think 34, whatever, he's a guy who's got some experience. Maybe he could do it, but you got to prove it to me, because I know GM3 can swim in waters with sharks, brother. So that's how I feel about it.